welcome to the Temple Mount Podcast. My name is Shogun. Joining me again today is my good friend Drew. He is a man of many talents, master mason, and many good podcasts with him in the past that you can find on our YouTube and BitChute channels. Most importantly, join the Temple Mount Discord server so you can join the conversation. That being said, welcome, Drew. Thank you for joining me. How are you, brother?
Good. Thank you again. As always, I appreciate the space you have to offer. This will be pretty good. I'm excited to see where this ends and a lot of other people's insight. This is an ongoing project that I've worked on throughout life, the past 4 years really. So, discussion about the presentation afterwards is going to be what really helps me push the work forward in the future. But I'm good. Thank you, man.
You are most welcome. So do you want to just take us into this?
We can just jump right into it because it's an essay I essentially wrote, but it's broke up in a way that it addresses the core details, and we can hop into the discussion afterwards. So we can hop right into it, get the core material out of the way. First note that on the text channel and recorded podcast, it's accompanying this VC. I've got a notepad document listed there. If you download the notes, you'll be able to find some resources and some notable figures that inspired the paper itself. If you're curious what kind of inspired this, that's where you can find that. And there's also resources addressing the problem. Okay, I'll just jump right into it. All right. I named the paper Quantum Thinking, Bridging Theory and Education. Albert Einstein once stated, "The measure of intelligence is the ability to change. In the continuum of human consciousness, every moment is a quantum leap, paradoxically intertwined with itself. Linear thinking is akin to lateral thinking. It shapes the collective unconscious, giving rise to a theological persona in some fashion or another. This in turn deceives individuals as interpretations of subjective realities create and divide between themselves." This paper seeks to draw a conclusion on pressing social and political issues that fracture our democracy, a democracy requiring equilibrium between ethics and order. We carry an ethical responsibility to address these societal challenges and provide a refined system for future generations. We'll delve into the problems, facets, and present a solution distilled from the wisdom of philosophers and psychologists. First segment, cognitive dissonance and educational influence. Our educational system is inadvertently embeds cognitive dissonance, subtly infusing the theological viewpoints into young minds, making them susceptible to a toxic indoctrination without even realizing it. This paper aims to offer a compelling rationale for expanding academic horizons for our youth, even if it means extending their schooling time by a year or two. Understanding perspectives and cognitive dissonance. Perspectives can be defined in two ways: as the art of representing three-dimensional objects on a two-dimensional surface, or as a particular attitude or viewpoint. Carl Jung likened the conscious mind to the ego, the surface layer of our awareness. This perspective plays a crucial role in shaping our individuality, influenced by the conflicting perspectives of others and our nurturing environment, ultimately seeping into the subconscious. The role of philosophy in education. This prompts us to reflect on why philosophy isn't more integrated into our educational system and how this omission affects our perspectives. The collective unconscious is strained by cognitive dissonance, rendering traditional linear and lateral thinking inadequate. Our youth grapples with high levels of depression and soaring suicide rates, primarily stemming from their environment, society's treatment of one another's reflections and perspectives. A regression to primal instincts is inevitable, demanding more comprehensive solutions. A call for holistic education. Therapy, though valuable, has its limitations, often comforting or enabling instead of directly addressing the underlying issues. To prevent this, it is imperative to start with individuals from a young age, where they are most malleable. Cognitive dissonance affects not only religious or ignorant minds, but also the intelligent skeptics, potentially leading to nihilism. Preventing nihilism through education. We must prevent nihilism while introducing new educational essentials. Karl Popper's Popper's perspective on science and philosophy underscores the importance of understanding the world we live in. It's time to broaden the educational horizon, encompassing not just math, science, and history, but also philosophy, psychology, art, and life skills. Our goal should be to empower children for life and individuality rather than conforming them to a machine-like system. In conclusion, we must address cognitive dissonance, philosophical exploration, and a holistic approach to education. By doing so, we can equip future generations with the critical thinking skills and ethical foundation needed to navigate an increasingly complex world. As we expand the horizons of our youth, we invest in a brighter future, one where individuals are better equipped to find purpose and understanding in an ever-evolving world. So that's essentially the essay and where I'm at. It was help written with fact checked and spell checked with what I think it's ChatGPT. So if it seems a little AI, it was restructured by an AI, but the core writing is mine. We can move into like a Q&A and open discussion from here if y'all would like. If there's any questions about kind of like what you heard and something I can elaborate on more that I didn't do in the paper.
I mean, I had a hard time absorbing it all at once, and I feel like if you could give like a, in your own words, paraphrase, help some people who.
Right. Essentially, one of the biggest problems we're facing in society right now is how we're being educated. Like we're in an educational system that's making you into a tool for the government. It's not really allowing independence, free thinking, or anything of that nature. Nor do I think it wants that of you. You know, I think it is an intentional system, and it's been instilled in us for so long now that you can see it kind of like seeping out into like everyday life. I think that it's one of the core reasons why mental health is so bad, is because people aren't being equipped to explore their minds in a way that they can find rationale and comfort. And like psychology and philosophy play a huge role in that. And you only delve so much into that throughout the education system, grades 1 through 12, right? And they don't offer enough avenues to really explore psychology and philosophy from a young age.
I definitely feel, Drew, that the system is, like you said, designed in a way where it's not nurturing us into our natural talents. It's designed to make us into obedient worker slaves, essentially. Like, I believe the school system that we see today, like the public school system, was originally designed and funded by, the Rockefeller Foundation. And David Rockefeller literally said, he's like, I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers.
Right, exactly. Yeah, there's plenty of evidence that the system was intentionally set up to like brainwash people really into just becoming the bare necessity to survive in a system, and if you give somebody the ability to really think for themselves, you free them, to their true potential and what they could do. There's plenty of people out there that could have been wonderful artists or wonderful musicians or some of the greatest writers of all time, and they probably will never touch those passions because they were swayed into manual labor or something like that without having an opportunity to really explore passions that they were talented at.
Yeah, we're told what to think, basically, instead of how to think. It's not really teaching.
Right. And exactly. And I think that's what leads to like a lot of like mental illness, honestly, like on a surface level, not like genetic mental illness. That's a whole nother hurdle in itself, of course. But like if you create a pattern for a young mind that you you're doing this to do this next step, then this next step, and you have no real choice in it. You're just going to do this and find where you fit best on that very simplistic level. And so you got them on this hamster wheel, and by the time they're tired out, they're out of breath, they're passing out from all the stress, the workload, trying to survive, trying to get an education where they can be successful and have a career. By the time they're done with all of that, they don't even know who they are, because they were never really given the freedom to explore who they were, from a young age. They've been in this rat race for so long. I think that's what leads to a lot of midlife crises. These are people that, go their whole life in a rat race, and then one day they realize, I'm going to die one day, and then they panic because they don't know who they are.
Yeah, that's very true. Like a lot of what you call mental illness is often caused by, existential crisis. So people lose themselves. They get lost in the sauce of reality.
Yeah.
Reality tells them what to think, what to act, how to be, which idols to worship. Like, it completely tells you what you're supposed to be and do and align with in very malicious ways. And by the time you realize, you're like, oh wow, all of these things are just programming and this isn't really me, then you're right in the psychosis and an existential crisis.
Yeah, your brain quite literally floods with who you never found out you were, and imagine if from a young age you were offered core philosophies from the greatest philosophers of time that have tackled a lot of these crises that they had, that they kind of walked through and kind of talked to themselves and rationalized with themselves and found comfort in the chaos that is exploring life in a philosophical way. You lead to an existential crisis largely when you realize how insignificant you are. If you get lost in the insignificance, you forget that that's the very thing that makes you significant. It's incredibly paradoxical, and that ebb and flow is handed down by the greatest philosophers of time. And I think that inherently did become, in some fashion, the field of philosophy. Inherently the field of psychology at some point. I can't quite draw the line where it ebbed one into the other, right? But it's clear to say that philosophy inspired psychology largely in what it is today. And you get slapped with a label, right? And you're not genetically dispositioned to have that mental illness, right? So it's more something that you can work through. It's an emotional baggage or trauma, things of that nature that you can work through. You just weren't necessarily given the tools to do so. A lot of philosophy delves into those key tools to help you sift through who you are as an individual. You'll note in my resources, I did put in there Carl Jung and Jordan Peterson. Now, I don't like everything Jordan Peterson does, to be clear, but there is a lot that he talks about. In one of his books, the 12 Steps to Life, I think, I can't remember exactly, but it's a guide to, from a very simplistic fashion, getting on your feet, making your bed every day, and just these basic things that do largely improve you and your mental health. But they're so small and so insignificant that you don't realize that by the end of the year, you're a completely different person than you were before. Now you're on top of things that you weren't before. And it's strange how, if you look at the reviews on this book, there are people in their 30s and 40s that are like, I wish I had this in my younger years and things of that nature. And if you really look at the core material of that book, it's like, wow, this is some of the simplest stuff. I wonder how many people were not raised well, you know what I mean? No shame on parenting and whatnot, but it's a lot of these people are in circumstances where they're being raised by a system, not parents. And to find that these self-help books are so successful and whatnot in a lot of areas is especially from age demographics of 30 plus years old, people that are supposed to be pretty, well-to-do in their prime now are completely lost and just now finding out who they are. Really imagine if they had some of this core work earlier in life, And that's one of the reasons why I'm trying to work on this paper and push it. I have a few different versions of it. where I make a lot more quotes and a lot more references to like Jordan Peterson's work and Carl Jung's work and stuff. But I found it kind of like overcomplicated it for like the average person. It is already so complex because it's got a little bit of jargon to it, trying to explain the lines. In the original paper, I explained what lateral thinking and linear thinking was, and I just kind of figured that was not really needed, you know. But I had so many definitions in it, and then I realized I was falling victim to, you know, jargon, so I had to chop half the paper out and just get the core idea out there. And I figured I'd bring it here and keep having these conversations, you know. And I'm rambling, so I'm sorry. I know I am.
Yeah, I get very fascinated by the ideas of you know, linear, lateral, and even vertical thinking. I think those are all really interesting concepts that definitely, when you explain those to someone in a preface, it allows you to explain a whole bunch of other situations from lateral and vertical perspectives. And somebody's like, oh, okay, like you gave me the cipher, so now it's like, now I can understand your analogies.
Right. One of the ideas I had though while writing this is like, imagine if like we had a Plato's Republic in every high school. It's a class where students are throughout their high school career learning about philosophers, and they kind of have to pick a philosopher, the ideal, either strongman it or something in that fashion, like either represent it in a new light, why this is good philosophy, and they kind of all take the podium. Like, you know how like we have like class elections for school presidents and stuff like that. Like, imagine if in another kind of fashion we were having kids, you know, put their feet in the battlefield that is the mind, you know, and like tackling these philosophical ideas together. And this would allow children from also an early age to learn how to have proper rhetoric and how to deliver an argument, receive an argument, strongman it, you know, point out fallacies and things of that nature, you know, because if you do that in just a conversation, you can do that in the conversations you have with yourself when you are talking to yourself.
Yeah, I agree with all of those things. Those are definitely things that we should teach kids and find a way to teach them. Probably the biggest problem we see in today's world is the lack of philosophy, right? Because what does philosophy mean? Philosophy is the love of wisdom. And there are very few out there who are wise, and even some that are wise don't necessarily love it.
Right. There is the burden of knowledge. Emotionally,
Yeah.
it's very draining. But that's also why I point out nihilism. You know, there's a fine line that every person that gets into philosophy heavily, they'll find themselves approaching nihilism if you go too deep down the rabbit hole, you know, especially like when it comes to like determinism. Determinism is a very I don't want to say dangerous philosophy, but a cruel one. It's a very cruel philosophy to convince yourself of. Like, even if it is actually 100% true, it's quite cruel to the self to put yourself in that kind of cage, right? Like, it's like, what's the point at that point, you know? If it's determinism, you might as well believe in destiny.
Is that so bad to believe in destiny or determinism? I mean,
to a certain extent, right? Because you want the free will, right? We all do want free will.
I guess. I mean, I personally don't believe in free will, and I guess you could see that as depressing, but you could also just sort of see it as sort of liberating, right? We do all have a destiny. Like, we can't control. We don't know what's going to happen to us. It's in God's hands. So I'm just saying I can see both sides of that. Like, you could see it's depressing to have not free will, or you could just, I mean, you know, if everything is exactly the way God made it, then, you know, it's in his hands, out of our hands. We do have a destiny, right?
Yeah, if you surrender to it in a certain fashion, you can find comfort in it. I don't take that away from anybody.
I think additional to presenting school of thoughts, students should be encouraged to have their own thoughts and ideologies, and even though they might be wrong or incomplete, they'll give them a boost in their confidence in building their own ideology.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's one of the reasons why people are so attracted to platforms like Discord or even the server, right? Temple Mount. Like it's a round table where people come together with their rhetoric and have these discussions. And it really does improve a lot of people's mental health because they feel heard finally. They feel heard. Even if, they might be wrong or right about something, whether it triggers an argument or not, they're being acknowledged. Their ideas are being acknowledged. I think if that people from an earlier age are presented that facet, then they'll be braver to communicate with people in everyday life. We're getting so antisocial.
It's actually amazing what like the Temple Mount community really can do for somebody. Like especially you encounter people who are like super distorted, like they're in the eighth sphere, as Rudolf Steiner would call it, and their thoughts are twisted and distorted and half true and built on weak foundations, and then just by talking to these people about what are your ideas,
Mm-hmm.
what do you believe, have you ever thought about it this way? Like I've actually had multiple people who I've met just for the first time one night have me at the end of like 4 hours of talking say, you've done more for me in this one evening than 20 years of therapy has ever done.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah,
Just because
exactly.
I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to entertain crazy ideas, and then I'm willing to then apply what I have discovered to be the truth over their ideas in a harmonious way that brings them out of their distortion and more into like a crystalline type of clarity, something with structure, something that can be presented in a way that is logical and coherent while still fantastical.
Yeah, I mean, I can also attest that, this place has been the best thing for my mental health, way better than, anything else that could be done by the psychiatric institution or conventional therapy or anything. It's like just the
right.
communication, the community, I think a huge part of it for people with mental health, stigmatization, isolation, loneliness, those are the big killers. So having a community with other people that have similar but different experiences is massively, massively helpful. So,
Right. And people come away from places like this able to argue their ideals better because, it's put to the grindstone of, rhetoric. Like in places like able to sharpen the blade that is your words, like that's so important. Not many people can do that. Not many people, there are people out there that have grandiose philosophies in their mind that they don't know how to express to other people, and I think it has a lot to do with not being encouraged from an early age. Like, what do you feel? What do you think? Or kind of just told what to feel and think, so after so long of doing that, you become just this cog in a machine. What I keep trying to tap back into and bring forward is that we shouldn't be doing that to people, that we should be offering environments like this from an earlier age, and philosophy and psychology is going to be one of the greatest tools to allowing that to happen. I honestly don't see it ever happening, is the saddest thing about the whole discussion, right? But it's like it's got to be had. People have got to start talking about it and getting out there and stuff. Like originally when I wrote this paper, it was much more passionate. It was like more of like a kind of like soapbox manner. You know what I mean? Like I was, it's supposed to be a passionate speech and whatnot about the educational system. And then I kind of like reverted back and made it very like robotic when I put it through the AI. I need to go back and find the original. I'll share both versions of it for anyone that's interested. Just kind of see like the one with the motion and then the one that's just the ideal itself, right? I've been playing a lot with Chat GPT. It's very interesting to me.
I think you made a really good point is that like having like a forum where you can like present your ideas, have your weak aspects of your ideas broken down, and then come back by reforging them stronger with new perspectives. Like it's like iron sharpens iron, right, Shugan? And as a result of those types of interactions, that's actually how you get smarter, how you build better ideas, how you create stronger constructs, right? Otherwise,
Yeah.
because like a lot of these people that you'll encounter, they're young, they're in like their 20s, They're still trying to figure out what the hell is reality, what's
And they're
even
so
going on,
angry.
who am I, what am I, and they're super filled with all of the vices, like all the archons are just driving them. And yeah, like I think that that's one of the hardest things though, is like the idea that we could provide a community like this to everybody. But the thing is for that to work, it means that everybody has to agree to follow the rules. And that's the hardest thing that we deal with is like, well, can you follow these simple rules, right? These little commandments that we tell you, and then you're totally free to do whatever.
So that's one of the things I try to drive home about, like, academic philosophy teaches you how to have proper debates. You know what I mean? There's ethics to how you encourage somebody's ideals or you argue their ideals. You know what I mean? And that's where a lot of people, like I talk about someone who has very passionate ideals. They're young, but they're angry and they don't know how to convey them without even offending themselves or somebody else. You find them in these kind of like cancel circles where they're like, you say something, you get triggered by it, or they get triggered by it. And then that's when the cognitive dissonance happens in a way, is because now they're revolted by this person that's sharing an ideal. It doesn't matter what that ideal is. The discussion's over now because there is disgust in the eyes of the person, right? And so it's a complete shutdown, whereas the rhetoric that comes from academic philosophy teaches a certain amount of stoicism when you go onto the platform of philosophy. So you engage in debate and rhetoric in a very particular manner on an intellectual level. You know, you don't let your emotions get rise. You listen to the person, even if you disagree with them, and then you strong man their arguments. You know.
Exactly. Yeah, like you definitely, it's all about like respecting the truth and the information that's being presented, because like it doesn't matter how ridiculous or backwards someone gets, as long as you can prove to them or show them with a logical argument why they're wrong. There's only two choices. They either come to the conclusion that they've been wrong and accept it and then grow, or they will just get dissonant and then they will start it. Usually the number one thing some people do is attack the debater, right? Like, and that's one of my big signs in a debate that somebody's already lost, is if your argument is broken down to the point where you are now resulting to personal character attacks instead of the actual information, the argument, it means you just lost.
Right, and that is forbidden in like a rhetoric platform based in philosophy. Like, you don't do that. You don't do ad hominem. That is like the ultimate weakness in philosophy. Like, so you avoid that at all costs. You do not attack character in a discussion where you're battling your ideals. You know, you can attack the character of the ideal on an ethical level, but you can't attack the person. That's trifling, childish behavior. You know, there's a just good example here is like there's a guy on a soapbox. He has a simple sign. Simple sign. I'm not going to insert anything in here. Just use your imagination. But insert offensive question right there on the sign, and you get 40 college students coming up and screaming into the mic what a fucking bigot you are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And nobody's willing to actually engage in the discussion. And even if they do, they maybe last 3 to 5 minutes before they're so aggravated and angry that they revolt to the same behavior of the crowd. So you find this kind of behavior in college institutions. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, this could have been easily prevented if you had taught children how to have a discussion. Children are not being taught how to talk to one another. So they go into life, screaming their ideals as if it's the sole truth and nothing but the truth. You know what I mean? They stand on their truth, and they get lost in themselves, their ideals, and they're not willing to listen to anybody else. And that can be taken care of very early in life. It's not that hard. You look at any form of indoctrination and it works. And it doesn't matter if it's a good or bad indoctrination, they both work. So if you start early enough, you start giving kids proper rhetoric and good platforms where they can speak their minds, argue with each other respectfully, then from an early age they'll be equipped with real world discussions. The Thanksgiving table won't be so much of a burden. People would be more excited to go to the Thanksgiving table and discuss what they've learned that year with their family and their friends. But now people are terrified to sit at the Thanksgiving table and talk about anything to most of their family. It's a very sad thing.
Well, I also think that the hyperfixation on political topics is also a big problem. Like, when's the last time you sat down at like Thanksgiving dinner and then one of the teenage kids is talking about the phi ratio and how it's like present in all these different forms in nature and like in our body, and it's like you can see that like here this part of your finger and this part of your finger is exactly 1.618 ratio from the other part, and it's like there's like this underlying like something interesting, right? Because that's what philosophy is. Philosophy is wisdom. It's the love of wisdom, and it's like the idea that people just want to be wise about a political theater is like being like, I know more than you about Jersey Shore, bro. Like, come at me, gym tan or laundry, dude. Like, and I feel like it's one of the biggest dividing topics. It is very important to like the socio-economic like realm that we're a part of. But really, it's like, when's the last time people just sat down and talked about cool shit about reality, like the beauty of nature and like how there are underlying patterns to all of existence and
Yeah. I think that a lot of people feel that way, and they do recognize that. Like, there was an awakening not long ago where a lot of people realize this, but they don't know how to talk about it. They don't know how to explain it without sounding completely fucking nuts, you know, just to be honest. I mean, it's like when I went through my awakening, right? I tried to convey such grandiose experiences and ideas to people. I just get kind of blank stares, you know, and it's really hard to talk about those things, you know. And you have 4 or 5 years go by, and I build up a rhetoric around it after like talking with people on the internet, like y'all, you know, Temple Mountain, places like this. I was able eventually to convey things where people don't look at me like I'm absolutely crazy. You know what I mean? I start to make sense, and it comes back to that, you know, the grindstone of like places like this that allow the sharpening of your words and how to convey these ideas. And it's like, even if the Thanksgiving table was to become like a deeply spiritual philosophical table, half the people wouldn't know how to describe those experiences.
Well, thanks very much, Drew. Does anyone else have a question, or did you want to say any closing thoughts?
I have no closing thoughts, but I do welcome any other questions. If not, then I really did tap on the core material of what I wanted to get across today. So I'm good if no one else has any questions.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Drew. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your work with us. Thanks to everybody who listened and participated. Find us on the Temple Mount Discord server, and our podcast is on YouTube and BitChute, Temple Mount Podcast, Temple Mount Official. See you guys tomorrow. We have a podcast with my good friend and Navy officer Trigger to get his take on the current events in the Middle East. And the day after that, I'll be talking to Creatrix and Crimson about 5-dimensional spaceships and stuff like that. So check it out. Good night, everybody. God bless. Oops, I almost kicked Craig from the server instead of the room.